Come on, let her go, Cole. All right, we're back. This is the Front Row Podcast with Coach Mark Gottfried, and I am really pumped up today to have my guest here. And I have known Allison Williams for a number of years, and I'm so excited. And welcome, Allison. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm so glad to see you. I'm so glad to catch up with you. It's been so long. You were always one of my favorites when you were in the coaching world, so it's good to see you. Thanks for having me on.
So when I was coaching, Allison covered me a lot, and then I worked at ESPN, and so our paths crossed a number of times. And so, but I've always had this great respect for you. I've always believed that you are one of the up-and-coming rising stars in sports broadcasting, and you've had a career at ESPN, Fox. But really, I'm going to jump right in here and talk about how you got started, because I think, Allison, there's so many people, but I also think young women who would see you on television, or they see another female on television doing sports in the NFL or college basketball or NBA, wherever it may be. And I think young women probably look and say, wow, okay, that's super cool, and I'd like to do that one day. Mm-hmm. So like for you, Allison, how did you get started, and how did you get going in broadcasting?
I will tell you, it was a slow and steady journey. There was no big break that all of a sudden, shot me out of this cannon and into this business. I started where so many people do. I started with internships in college, right? And then I got a job at a locally produced, regionally aired sports show right out of college that was in South Florida. And that was huge for me because it allowed me to stay in the area where I had built relationships and I had a little bit of a network. So when opportunities came up locally, people reached out to me. And that was huge. And I think just like in your profession, relationships are pivotal. And I worked for this weekly sports show. It was called Miccosukee Sports Wrap. I was their feature reporter. And I remember being really hesitant to take the job because it wasn't this hard-hitting, strong journalism that I thought I wanted to get into, and I did want to get into, and I was worried about not being taken seriously. It was a lot of like feature fluff pieces, like go out. It was amazing. It was go out and learn to wakeboard or scuba dive, or I went skydiving for them. So it wasn't hard-hitting journalism, right? And I'm like, well, how do I get taken seriously if this is my first job, and am I going to be pigeonholed or labeled? And I talked to a professor at University of Miami, Professor Cephalo, and I was like, is this gonna label me a certain way? And she looked at me and she said, Allison, you can go out and wear a suit and sound like an idiot, and you can wear a bathing suit and sound really smart. And I had that, and then I had other people around me who I think were really pivotal in helping me understand how to be a woman in this business and how to use it as a blessing, as a benefit, instead of a negative. Mm-hmm. I remember Joe Rose, who played tight end for the Dolphins and was the sports director at the NBC station I interned. And he said, look, a lot of people are going to see you and they're going to be like, okay, well, this is why she's here. She's filling the female role, whatever. And he's like, screw it, let them. I'm doing what I'm doing because I play tight end. You can get the job you're going to get because you're a woman. That's not a bad thing. Like, we all have different attributes, different qualities that are going to help us land and be part of our story and where we want to go. So I was really fortunate early on to have some good advice from people about how to navigate being a woman in a very male-dominated industry and just to embrace it, like not apologize for it. I started there, and then I worked locally for the Marlins and Panthers in Florida, South Florida. I worked for a station that no longer exists, Comcast Sports Southeast. That was my first break into sideline reporting, and did high school football for them for a season, then college, and slowly just worked my way up. It was the same at ESPN. I started at ESPNU and was there for a few years before I got hired on at ESPN. And it, like I said, it was just a slow and steady climb. But I'm grateful for that because in this business, you have to be ready when the opportunity presents itself. If you're not, it can really set you back. So I was able to kind of cut my teeth in some smaller roles and eventually work my way up within ESPN. And then now being with Fox has just been amazing. So I'm super blessed to be working in a profession that was the dream, right? Like, this was always the goal. This was the hope when you're in college. And what do you want to be when you grow up? I'm it, right? Like, that's pretty special. I'm super thankful for that.
Allison, when I've gotten to know you throughout the years, and obviously you're really good at what you do, but there's a confidence I think that you have. You've had to have that as you're breaking in. and where you're confident that, and you have that appearance about you, like you're very strong in that regard as you're on television and whichever roles you're in. But like that kind of confidence, where do you think that kind of came from?
I think the preparation. Yeah, and I know what I know. And I know what I don't, and I'm okay with that, and I'm open to learning. And I think if you are prepared, then you can be confident. And that to me is everything. And I think also just internally, I have great parents who always instilled this sense of belief that I could do anything. I mean, my goals were big. I can remember as a little girl in like 3rd grade telling my parents I wanted to be the first female president of the U.S. And they didn't laugh at me. Like, they're like, okay, go get it, girl. So I think from a young age, I just had this amazing support system that really never held me back. I mean, I'm like from this small, tiny farming community in Michigan, middle of nowhere. And I always felt like everything was at my fingertips and I could go wherever and be anything and do anything. And that comes from parents that believe in you. I mean, that's everything, right? As you're young and developing. And I pray that my kids feel that way too. But my parents, they had such strong love and belief and support. I mean, I would ask them to do some like crazy things. I'd be like, yeah, you can do that. We will support you. We will help you. You got to put in the work, but we will have your back. And so I think between that and then again, just the preparation, especially in this business, you never know during the course of a game what's going to come your way. You don't know how the game's going to play out. You don't know who's going to be the star. You don't know what situations you're going to find yourself in. It is live television and anything can happen at any moment. So you have to know that you are prepared and you have done the work leading up to it, because then this situation arises and you're like, yep, we can roll with this because I've done the legwork. So I think those two things have allowed me to kind of just enter a world that can be a bit challenging and can break you down for sure, with that confidence and belief, because I had it around me, and then I knew the work that I did before kind of going on stage, if you will, going on screen.
And so I look back too, Allison, and I can remember, because even when I went from coaching and I went to ESPN and worked, so I was kind of in both roles, but I worked with some people at times that, and I'm going to sound like the old guy here, but there were females who were working in sports, in male sports, that really pretty, they had the look, but probably didn't do the homework and really struggled at times. And a lot of times the questions were just, I think if you're sitting at home, you're like, what was that question? Where it just seems to me all the times we worked together, and then obviously when you were in the ACC doing a lot with the ACC, you always seem to, like you said with the preparation, you always seem to be ready to go with good questions and insightful questions, and you just kind of had that way about you from the very beginning. And I think that's really impressive, because I do think there have been males as well, males and females. They're not prepared. They get on television and it comes out pretty quick that they're not prepared.
Yeah,
so your preparation, I think, has been probably key for you.
Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate you very much saying that. And you're right. And I also appreciate you saying that there are also a lot of males that don't do the work, because that is very true. I think what happened for so many years, especially when I was first coming into the business, like in the early 2000s, and it was a novelty to have a woman in this space as like, whether it's a sideline reporter or play-by-play. And while it had been happening for several years, you go back to the Leslie Vissers and the women who, in the 80s and 90s really paved the way and had a tough road because of that. There was this like novelty in the late 90s, early 2000s of, hey, we're going to put a beautiful woman on screen and that's going to attract the male viewers and appeal to them, and we'll just prop her up and figure out what comes out of her mouth. And sometimes it was bad. Like, there's no way around it. It was just bad. And it was unfortunate. And I think there was, for a time, a stigma to overcome for women, especially women who were beautiful, like an Erin Andrews. I think she had to break down a lot of barriers and walls about being beautiful and being intelligent and being able to speak intelligently on sports. And I think that took a lot of time. It's in a much better place now than it ever has been. You cannot get away with what people put on air 20 years ago. You can't. And I'm thankful for that, because you shouldn't. It should never have been that. And I can remember talking to people about the sideline role, and it was so not respected. right? Like people thought it was such an inconsequential throwaway role, and you were only there to check a box if you were a woman. And I encountered some things that were not very pleasant along the way because of that, and had to overcome. You have to like break people's perception of things. So I got into this business because I loved sports. I didn't get into this business because I wanted to be on TV. And that's a huge difference. And that wasn't the case, I think, a lot of times for a lot of women. They wanted to be on TV, or they wanted to be a star, or they wanted the fame. And I'm sure there's some men who fit that box as well. But for me, this was a way to be around the game. This was a way to be around football. I remember the first time I thought, I could maybe use television as a way to be around a game. I went to a Lions preseason game, and Jennifer Hammond, who worked at one of the local stations, was walking around on the sideline, and she was like one of the only women. I'm like, well, who is that? What does she do? And how do I get there? And I went to a coaching, or not a coaching clinic, like a NFL 101 clinic with the Lions. And the woman who showed us around, she went into sports management. I was like, well, that's what I have to do. I wanted to work in the front office of a team, or just be around football. I loved football. And as I went to University of Miami and explored different options, I thought back to that experience, of seeing Jennifer on the sideline and the broadcasting thing, and it felt very natural and comfortable to me, and I went that route instead. But this was always a means to be around sports. This wasn't a means to be in TV. So that's always been at the core of like why I love this job, is because of the game and the athletes and the stories you get to share and tell. It was never because like, you're going to be on a screen.
Isn't it interesting? Because if I go back to, Allison, this is interesting. In between when I was a coach at Alabama and NC State is when I was at ESPN. So that's when I first met you during that 2-year period. Then I end up in NC State. I'm in the ACC. And I want to say, I think I'm going to have my memory right here. You probably made it. I bet you don't even remember this because you did so many games. My first ACC game at NC State was against Maryland. And I'm pretty sure, and I'm going to go back and tell you why I'm going to tell you the story was, when I worked at ESPN at times, and I'm not trying to be critical of female reporters, but there were a couple of times where, like before halftime, like 5 minutes to go in the half, it was almost like, what should I ask the coach at halftime as they're walking off? You got to, sometimes the coach who's ahead at the half, you may interview them as they're going in the locker room, and then coming out of halftime, you might grab the coach that maybe their team was behind at the half. And so there were times when I had some people saying, what should I ask him? Like, what should I ask the question? And I might say, well, they switched from the man-to-man to the zone defense with about 10 minutes to go in the game, and do you feel like that had an impact in the half? Well, all of a sudden, it was like, wow, that's a great question, coming from somebody. So, but with you, that I remember it. The very first ACC game, we're playing Maryland, halftime, we're ahead. I'm coming off the floor. This would have been in 2011 maybe, or 12, probably January of 2012. And you got me at halftime, and you asked this amazing question. I remember walking off into the locker room going, wow, that was a pretty good question right there. Like, that was pretty good. So you've always had that ability to, I think just add a ton. And in whatever role that you've been in, whatever role, whether it's that role or different roles. And so I just think, because I've been a coach, and then I've also been in broadcasting.
You've seen both sides.
I've seen them both. And I just remember that day. I remember saying, wow, okay, that was pretty good right there. That was a great question. So
that's hilarious. It's so funny because I think people a lot of times think that those interviews are such throwaway moments. But for me, it's an opportunity to find out actually what's going on. Like the analysts are all kind of guessing, honestly. That's their opinion, that's their perception, but it's a rare moment to find out what is actually going on the bench and in the minds of the coaches. And I always tried to just think, if I was a fan watching at home or in the stands, what would I want to know? And that's always the approach I've taken at the half. And then I think you also, if there's any young reporters listening, listen to your analysts. Like they're gonna kind of lead you. They're gonna set the tone. They're gonna see things and say things. Find out if it's correct. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. And then that will give them further fodder for the second half. That's one of my favorite things, is to be able to find something out at the half or throughout the course of the game, relay it to the booth, and then let them go with it. Like if I can advance the conversation, that's what the job is all about, because we have such a unique perspective in games that nobody else on the broadcast does. Basketball is a little different because the guys are right there. But for football, I mean, they're, how far up in the press box. They're not seeing, they're not hearing, they're not sensing. I love working with Brock Heward, who's my analyst with Fox on college football, because he will ask me all the time during the break, Allison, what are you feeling? What's the sense? What's their energy down there? And he trusts my perception. And it's not always a report I get on air, but it's something to give him context of what he's seeing on the field. And I can bring him down, and he knows that I've got a pretty good feel. It can be like body language. I mean, it sounds so, again, kind of trivial, but it really feeds into, I think, setting the tone for a game. So I love that he will ask me that all the time, trust that I have the pulse on it, and then he'll weave it into how he kind of paints the picture of the game. And that's the most important role as a sideline reporter.
That is so cool. And do you feel sometimes, Allison, have you ever felt throughout your career just the pressure, or do you feel pressure as a female that you have to be even better and even more knowledgeable? Do you ever feel that way? Because there is somebody sitting on their couch somewhere watching a game, and they see you on television and they go, okay, she's cute, whatever, let's see what she's got to say. I wonder if she knows anything about sports. That's just a natural thing, I think. I know it sounds terrible, but it's the truth.
It is.
So do you feel at times pressure with that, maybe?
I just think your margin of error is much smaller. So I realized very early in my career, if a man makes a mistake, it's because he made a mistake. If a woman makes a mistake, it's because she doesn't know what the hell she's talking about. Right? So you got to be careful. And yeah, you have to do the work, and you have to, dot your I's and cross your T's and make sure you've read every story and you've checked every box and you've watched all the games, because if you make a mistake, you don't just reflect upon yourself, you reflect upon every woman in this industry. And that's just the way it is. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's a pressure, but there's an awareness, right? That if you screw up, it's going to reflect on a lot of other people as well. And you don't want to let any of them down. And you want to make sure that, everything's buttoned up and you do the best you can. That's
such an authentic answer. I love that, because it's true, and it's just the way of the world, and that you acknowledge that. So, all right, so your career is taken off, and you had to start there in South Florida and did a lot of different sports. ESPN, where you and I both kind of went through there in Charlotte a little bit, and then leads to ESPN, and your career at ESPN, in my view, is just blossoming. It's just starting to, nationally now, you're getting a lot of national attention. People across the country are getting to learn who you are, and there's a lot of respect gained. And then let's jump right in here. So you're at ESPN, and boom, here comes COVID.
Yeah.
And you have one child, and your husband and yourself. Here comes you're working on number 2.
Right.
But walk me through that a little bit, because that had to be, there are times, Allison, where there are defining moments in our lives. This became a defining moment for you.
Absolutely.
Without a doubt. And talk a little bit about that whole experience there.
Yeah. To set the scene a little bit, COVID initially for me professionally was really good. I got a ton of opportunities on college football I would not have if it wasn't for COVID. I was working with Herb Street and Fowler on the Prime crew because Maria Taylor was doing NBA stuff because their season went long, right? So I got all these amazing opportunities. I covered the national championship game because Tom Rinaldi had left and Holly Rowe got COVID. And so who's the next girl up or next person up? It was me. So in a lot of ways, I had some incredible opportunities throughout 2020 during the pandemic. And then 2021 rolled around and the vaccine started to come out. And, initially it was, hey, we're encouraging everybody. And then it transitioned to we're requiring it. And I, on multiple levels, was not comfortable with it medically, religiously, morally, ethically. I was very much opposed to the mandates. I was very much against any coercion and people's jobs being held over their heads if they didn't do something that they didn't agree with or believe in. And I believe in autonomy. And I think medical decisions should be made by individuals with their individual healthcare providers, whatever that looks like. So long story short, ESPN required the vaccine. I didn't get it, and I got let go. And it was a defining moment in my life. It changed everything. I can't even begin to describe it. It's crazy to look back on that time and how scared I was, how I realized through those, so this was like, oh my gosh, from June to October. Like June was when I got word that the mandates were going to come out, and October was when I got let go. And through this, my husband and I are trying to have our second child, and there was so much uncertainty. I'm negotiating a contract. I'm like trying to figure out my options with this vaccine. And I had to lean into my faith. I had to lean onto my family. And I was confronted with a choice of like, do I put my family first and my role as a mother and my belief in God and in Christ, or do I put my profession first? And I was such a professionally minded person. I mean, for much of my life, I didn't even know if I wanted a family. And if it hadn't been for my husband, I don't know if I would have had kids. Now I can't imagine being in this world without them and being a mom. Like it's the most amazing thing in the world to be a parent. So I went through this huge crossroads, right? And I ended up losing a job that I had attached so much of my identity to and my worth. Like I drew so much value from my role and pride from my role at ESPN and the job I did. And it was a dream. It wasn't just the profession. It was my dream. And it went away. And then it was like, who am I? Like, who am I? And I didn't know for a while. And it was really hard. I would like sit there at the college football Saturdays on the couch by myself or with my son. And I'm seeing, other women do the game I knew I should be at. And it was so hard. And I was so on the precipice of being really bitter. And then I got pregnant. And then I had that sense of purpose. And I eventually worked through to this point of clarity that, well, I thought my value was derived from my role with ESPN and as a reporter and all this. My true value in this world is in my home and with my kids. And I would just hug the shit out of Lyle and just kiss him up and down and squeeze him so tight and thank God for this growing human in my tummy and know that that was why I was in this position and I had to do everything for them. So I am a completely different person sitting here today than I was in the fall of 2021 or that summer. Like I can't even tell you the shift that I feel internally that I hope I'm living. I hope I'm living it because I am back working and I'm so thankful for that because I think that saved me from a lot of bitterness too. And I have such a beautiful work-life balance that I am thankful for every day that I probably wouldn't have if I was at ESPN. And I probably wouldn't be the mom I am if I hadn't gone through all that because I don't think I realized how important my job is as a mom. And I don't think I put my children, as much as I thought I was putting them first, I realize now I was sacrificing a lot working and being a mom. So it was a defining moment in my life. And I've accepted that. And I look forward though to the day when it's like just kind of a blip of a chapter instead of this. Right now, it just feels like it is kind of been what defines me for a lot of people. But I think someday it'll just be hopefully a chapter in a really good book.
Well, number one, you're amazing at what you do. So regardless of a defining moment, that's congrats to you. Forget all that. You're just really good at what you do. You're really, really good. And it was a defining moment. And I want to ask you without kind of probing too deep, like when it first started, because there were so many people in the world that were faced with kind of your situation and they didn't know what to do. It's kind of I play pickleball every day, and one of my buddies was 62 years old. He's a pilot for 30-something years at American Airlines, and he's 3 years away from retirement, and you have to take the vaccine or we're firing you. And, that's a different situation because now you're talking about retirement and income for the rest of your life, your retirement salary. Yeah. But there's so many people. So for you, Allison, let me back up. For you, when that conversation started with them, with ESPN, did you know it was coming? Like, there's going to be a line in the sand here, and it's kind of coming here. Did you feel it right away?
Yes, but it came on kind of gradually because I can remember in April, Disney sent out an email saying that, they hoped everybody would choose. They ultimately believed it. They hoped everybody would choose to be vaccinated, but they believed it was a personal choice. So I had some hope that would play out. But as we got further and further, the writing was kind of on the wall, right? I just always thought there would be a way to like find a compromise, or I really thought like, okay, well, I'll just test extra. I'll wear a mask. Like I'll do all the crap we had to do in 2020. And then I'll be okay. Like, why am I a threat if everybody else is vaccinated? Why am I a threat? Like, it didn't make sense to me. I mean, in 2020, nobody was vaccinated and I was able to do my job. Now it's 2021, and anyone that wants to be vaccinated is. And now I'm a threat. Like, that didn't compute, right? So I'm like, well, if I was safe to be around by testing and masking last year, let me test and mask this year. Like, we'll just, why isn't that protocol acceptable now? So I really thought there would be a way to accommodate me. I just could not fathom that it was this way or the highway. Like, there was no compromise. There was no workaround. There was no, okay, we respect that this isn't the best thing for you, but we value you, and like, we're going to work with you. And there wasn't. So I was surprised by that. And it was, like I said, a gradual process of escalating to that point. And when things really came to a head, that it was get the shot or lose your job. It was literally, that was the email I got. And so I was like, okay, well, I mean, my religious beliefs didn't change overnight. My medical opposition didn't change overnight. Like, this was always how I believed. So I guess I'm going to lose my job. And I did. It was a bizarre time. And I'm thankful because I was in a position where I wasn't in a single income family, right? I mean, my husband has a job. He has his own company. We're not going to lose our house. My kids aren't going to starve because I don't work. There's a lot of people that was what they faced. And that's horrible. You talked about your friend who's a pilot. Like, nobody should have to make that decision. It's just wrong on so many levels. It's not the country we live in. That's not being free. That's not autonomy. And I'm thankful that I was in a position that I could stand up for what I believed in, and I could hold on to my religious beliefs, and I could listen to my conscience and execute that. Where a lot of people, I mean, they had to do it to keep food on the table and to provide for their families. So there are people that went through way worse situations through COVID and the mandates than I did, and I am so aware of that. And I'm thankful to like I call them every soldier that kind of stood up in this fight. I hope someday like they all get their due, because what was done to people is just wrong on so many levels.
Allison, you're a champ. I mean, you're a role model. You're a champ. I mean, and the courage that you had to have, and you probably feel like it kind of was somewhat natural because of all your beliefs and your faith and all the things, but to still stand up for that is strong. So I commend you. I applaud you. I mean, and it's not just females, it's males, females, but I look at so many people out there that sometimes are struggling to find that courage. Like, you know, I kind of know what I should do is right, but sometimes I'm just not maybe strong enough. But they can now look at you and say, hey, she did it. Like, she had beliefs, she had convictions, and she stood in there and you hung in there. And so for that and for your husband and your kids, man, I'm really proud of you.
Thank you.
And it's amazing. Did you feel though, Allison, at times, like even after that? Because I know there was a period, and I know there's guys in the NBA that I know that said, hey, I'm not taking that vaccine. And, you know, we can get into that discussion. That's a whole topic for another day. But they had firm beliefs like you did. There were other people around the country. But did you start to feel like as you walked around all of a sudden that, you know, you had the L on your head, I'm the loser, or hey, if it wasn't for you, Allison, we'd all, you know, you got to get vaccinated. You're the problem.
I was definitely the problem.
You're the problem. But did you start to feel that as a little bit, or did you, or did your you still knew in your gut you were doing the right thing?
I did, but yes, and you hear the things and you see the things, and I was called every name in the book, and a grandma killer, and selfish, and all that stuff. And look, I just said, give it time. Like, that's what I told myself. I'm like, if I'm wrong, great, I'll be wrong, and everybody's going to be healthy and saved, and so be it. But I really felt at my core like I'm going to be on the right side of history when this all comes to a head, and when time passes and things are revealed and some truths come out. But I was also like, okay, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. At least I did what I believed was right. But yes, there was definitely a lot of animosity, more from people that I didn't know than I did. I'm very grateful for the people that reached out and support. And I give credit to the people that reached out and didn't necessarily support my decision, but they supported me. and they knew that I was going through a difficult time, and they just wanted me to know that they loved me and they were here for me. And they didn't align with my position, and that to me was okay. Like, I don't expect everybody to agree. We need to get out of this space of like everybody needs to agree with everything we do and think, right? So I really valued the coworkers and friends that I had that said, look, I don't necessarily agree with what you're doing, but I care about you as a person, and I want the best for you, and I know you're going through a tough time, and I'm here for you. And that was awesome. And that meant so much to me. And I know there are people who still think I was an idiot and like I threw away my career and like what the hell. And that's fine. Like they're entitled to that. I have peace with where I'm at. I have peace with my decision. And it was really interesting to watch this experience unfold for my family too. Like my parents, like I said, from a very small town, took so much pride in what I did and so forth. And I think they were really nervous about when this comes out, how is she going to be perceived? Like, are people going to question if we're vaccinated? Like, are we going to be ostracized within our community? And they were overwhelmed by the number of people that came up and applauded my decision to them. And to this day, I mean, I was mentioned the subcommittee hearing in Congress. My name was mentioned in Dr. Fauci's whole deposition, and people came up to my mom like, "Did you hear they mentioned Allison's story?" But like, so it was cool to see for her. Like, there was, I think, a lot of concern about how they would be treated and what people would have to say to them. Like, your daughter's doing this; she's part of, and the community overwhelmingly supportive, and I'm so thankful for that, because I know there was, like, they're very how do you say it? Like, they like to be liked. Like, they're big in the community. I mean, nobody wants to be the jerk, right? Right. And so I think there was some concern for them about how I would be perceived and how they would be perceived in the community. And it's been overwhelmingly positive, which is really encouraging, because I think in a lot of ways, when I was making my decision, everyone wanted you to think that you were the minority, because the other side was so vocal, and they were so encouraged to be vocal and to shame people into getting vaccinated. And they were like, the bullying that went on was encouraged, which is so crazy to me. So you really felt like you were alone, but that's how they wanted you to feel. And then once my whole ordeal was very publicly blasted, which was also crazy, I realized how not alone I was, which was the beautiful part of all that. Is I thought I was in the minority. I thought I was the only one. And then come to find out, there's so many people that are going through the same thing and have the same beliefs and the same concerns. And so we all were able to kind of uplift and rally around each other. And that to me was very apparent, that like the powers that be never wanted that to happen. They always wanted you to think that you were the only one that felt or thought that way. And it just wasn't the case.
Not at all. Allison, I've had a couple, periods in my life where, I've been fired and, coaching and it's tough and hard. But there's been times where I have felt like, and I've used this term a lot, where my moral compass or my compass, is broken, and I've made poor decisions. But regardless, I've had these periods where I've felt, really deserted, and I'm down, and you've been fired, and it's public, it's humiliation, it's blah blah blah. But I've always kind of had a core group of people that I can kind of go to and call on to, and I don't know if you want to mention names, but did you have a group or did you have some people that you could just pick the phone up, or might have been your husband or whomever, where you're kind of, when we find those points in life when we feel like we're at the depths of, I just don't know what to do, and we need that, we need that. Did you have some of that where you had people like that?
Yeah, and it was my family. It was my sisters. It was my mom and dad. It was my husband. I can remember walking with my son. He was, a year and a half. He's in the stroller. And I'm on this trail, and I'm talking to my oldest sister, Carrie. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. This was like July. And I said, Carrie, I really think I'm going to lose my job. And I just don't know how I'm going to do this. Like, how am I going to publicly be blasted as this anti-vaxxer and all these things? And I'm like, I just can't imagine. I cannot imagine not working this fall. What am I going to do? How am I knowing, maybe I need to get a fake card. What am I going to do? This is crazy. I can't lose my job. I can't lose this part of me. And I remember her saying, when it's quiet, what do you feel? What do you hear? When you block out all the noise and you just are there with God, what do you feel in your core? And I said, I have to walk away. And she goes, and that's your answer. And I just remember crying. I was like, seriously? She's like, you got to listen. You got to listen to that voice. And I mean, there were so many conversations like that with my husband. I can remember coming down, like he's down there watching TV, and again, I'm just bawling. I swear I don't cry that much. I did a lot for those few months, though. And I'm just bawling. He's like, oh my God, what happened to you? Like, what is wrong? And that was when I told him, I was like, this is going to happen. Like, I'm not doing this, and I'm not going to fake it. And I think this is my decision. He's like, okay, I support you, and we're going to get through this. Like, we're going to be okay. Like, are you going to be okay? It's like, I don't know. But yes, so it was my family. It was a few friends. And then again, it's the faith, right? It's like this trust in a higher being that you always say you have, and then you're tested. And this was my test, and I knew it. I knew it was my test. This was God saying, do you really believe I'm going to take care of you? Because I had to leave it up to him, because it was out of my hands now. Like, I walk away from ESPN, it is out of my hands. I don't get the shot. I lose control, right? And I was like, okay, this is the test. I'm going to trust you. Like, you have always had my back. I've lived such a blessed life. I really have. From the opportunities to my kids to these like chance happenings, right? And I felt like this was a test. I felt like this was him saying, do you really believe I'm going to take care of you? And I didn't know how, and I didn't know what it would look like, but I truly believed in my core at some point, whether it was in a year or 2 years or 5 years, like I was going to be okay and I would be whole again. And I did. My sister, when I had that conversation, I knew this was the test. I knew this was the moment that I had to truly like stand in my beliefs and not just walk the walk, but talk the talk. But there's no way I would have gotten through that stretch without those people that you talk about, that when your life is being thrown, a million different directions, that they can kind of steady that ship for you.
And people that you trust.
Yes.
They're people that know that they love you no matter what. And
Right.
so when they're talking to you, their interest is just you and your best interest.
Right.
And those people that have wisdom to say, and sometimes it's great, somebody that can look at a situation from the outside too, because when you're in it, you're in the storm a little bit. It's hard sometimes, but you stood firm. And, Allison, has there ever been a time then, and now you're back on your feet and you're working for Fox and your career is just taking off, and I think you're one of the best out there. And, but like for me, when I have, been fired, there's been periods where, man, I have held this bitterness, boy. I am bitter at the people, and I get, I get mad and I feel like I was wronged and, all those things. And that's just not healthy. It's not healthy. And, but did you ever experience some of that? Like,
Yeah.
God, I'm so angry at them and I'm mad and bitter. And you almost can see it in people. Like they walk around bitter, and I never wanted to be that, but it's natural. There's some natural part of that too.
I still fight that.
Yeah.
I still fight that. I'll see certain events that like I would be doing.
That's right.
It's hard, right? Like I should be there. That was my job. Well, those are my guys, right? Yeah, I still battle that. I wouldn't say every day, but regularly, when I see some of my former coworkers and what they're doing and the opportunities they're getting and the games they're covering. Yes, I still battle that, but I have to remember that I needed to recalibrate, and I have. And I think we as a culture have been so driven towards this consumer mindset, right? Like success is defined very clearly by how much money you make in the car you drive and the people you roll with or whatever. Like we exist in this consumerist society where it's what we drive, what we wear, the house we live in. And when I went through all that, I realized like that was so unfulfilling. And so I had to really recalibrate for me what was important. And I realized it's my family. It's the type of mom I can be. I had to like get new interests. It was kind of a weird like shit. You're gonna make fun of me, but I literally I started gardening and growing my own food and freaking doing sourdough and got chickens. And I felt like I had to kind of reground and recenter myself because all I was interested in was sports, right? And I'm like, now this just makes me angry watching this stuff. It's not making me happy. I got to get some new freaking hobbies. Like I didn't have hobbies. Who has hobbies when you're in our business, right? You don't. So anyway, yes, I still fight that, like, that should be me. But I have fulfillment because I love what I'm doing with Fox. I love the people I work with. I am back in the profession I love. And I have, like I said, a much better work-life balance. And that's why I have to remind myself of that and how much more time I am getting with my kids in pivotal years of their lives. And those first 5 years that are so important, I am home so much more. And that I have to remind myself, like, that's what matters. Mm-hmm. Like, it doesn't matter how much money I make. Right. It doesn't matter that I don't, have the latest Louis Vuitton and the biggest game. Mm-hmm. I may never work a Super Bowl. I probably will never work a Super Bowl in my life. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean I didn't succeed.
I think you will.
And I'm okay with that now. Like, there was a moment, if you would have told me, like, you better not be okay. No, I'm okay with that. Like, I have things in my life that some women and men who have all the success in the world never get to experience. Mm-hmm. That's what matters. Mm-hmm. So I've had to redefine, like, what success is, what matters, what I put value in, because I think it's like a human instinct, right, to compare and all that stuff. And there's that quote, like, what is it? Comparison is the thief of joy, and it's true. Mm-hmm. So I have to remind myself of that regularly because I think it's easy to look at someone else and be like, how come they're doing that? Like, that's not fair. Right. This is bullshit that I
like. What about me?
Right. So, I think that's a total normal.
When I have been in some of those moments where I've, like you, and then I didn't stand up like you did, and I'm so proud of you. But for me, even when I've kind of been, I feel like punched in the gut and I'm down, my audience, because when you're in it sometimes, especially in coaching, you see the 20,000 people in the stands, you're on national television, everybody knows what you're doing, everybody blah, 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 blah. And then when you kind of hit those points where you're alone, you're questioning everything, for me, my audience became my family, just my 5 kids. That was really all that mattered.
Right.
That's it. I mean, and if they're good, and I can imagine that as your children grow up and they get older, and they're young now, but as they become older, and they learn your story. They learn mom's story. Mm-hmm. Mom has a story. They don't know it now, but at some point they will. And your audience are those two right there, and your husband, because they're going to learn more about life, convictions, determination, your beliefs, your faith from what you did, your 2 children and your husband. And really at the end of the day, I mean, Not that that's all that matters, but it kind of, those children and your family. And so what a story for you, Allison. What a story that you're giving them.
Well, and I just hope someday when they find out about it in whatever manner they do, I just hope they know that it was for them, and that I don't regret a single thing because it gave me them, and they're healthy and they're here and I'm with them. And I hope that they are proud. I do. And I think they will be. I think about, so the first opportunity I got after losing my job with ESPN was with Daily Wire. Mm-hmm. And I knew nothing about Ben Shapiro or that organization. I just knew they wanted me to work for them and I didn't have a job. And I was like, okay, great. Where do I sign up? Like, send me over the contract. Cool. I don't care how much you're paying me. Like, whatever you want to do, I'll do it. And we ended up doing this series of interviews called Breakaways. And sat down with some really dynamic people, from like Nick Rolovich, who went through the same thing at Washington State that I went through, and him sharing his story for the first time publicly, and Dana White and others. And the whole time I'm pregnant with Lexi, with my daughter. And I remember thinking, how cool is this to have her like physically and visibly a part of this series at this moment in my life. And I hope she in some ways feels the energy from these brave, courageous, faith-based people, not Dana White, but the other 3, who have stood up in some difficult times for what they believed in and changed so much because of that. And I remember thinking, like, I pray like the energy of these people and the courage of these people is like somehow being surrounding her. And I love that someday I'll be able to like show her pictures or show her the videos and the interviews, and visibly very pregnant, right? And like, you were a part of this and a driving part of it. And knowing her now, she's almost 2. I can tell you she's got some fight in her. And so whatever was
like
going
Mama.
on then, she's got it. It happened.
Tell me about this one. So all this has happened, ESPN, and then you had the Daily Wire. You had other things, but call comes from Fox. How'd that feel?
So let me tell you that story.
Okay.
This is actually really cool and a testament to relationships, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm in Wyoming. We have a place outside of Jackson Hole that we go every May and open it for the season and work our asses off for like 2 weeks. But it's a labor of love, and we're in the middle of nowhere. And I start getting texts from Brock Heward. And he's like, hey, call me when you can. I kind of did something. I hope it's okay. So call me back right away. So I have to like drive to cell phone service. I call him. I'm like, what's going on? And Brock and I worked together for 2 years at ESPN. And I just adore him on so many levels. He's amazing, an amazing professional and an even better family man. So he's like, so I kind of did something. I hope it's okay. But I basically cash in all my chips at Fox to get them to hire you on as a reporter. I'm like, you what? He's like, you do want to come back to work, right? Like, well, yeah, oh my God. She's like, that would be amazing. Seriously? He's like, yes, like we need you. I want you. We need a sideline reporter consistently. Like there's nobody better than you. And I told them whatever goodwill I built up, I want to cash it in right now. I want Allison. And I'm like, oh my God. Okay. Let me call my agent, let him know. And so then my agent went to work with Fox. And I mean, it happened so fast. I did a Zoom interview with them because I was pregnant. I was due any day. So I didn't even want to drive up to LA. They were like, don't drive up to LA. I would have. But I was due any day. So they're like, let's just meet over Zoom. I had an hour Zoom conversation with 2 of the bosses there. And they're like, okay, great. Well, we'll be in touch. I was like, all right, awesome. Sounds good. And then literally, I don't know, like a week or 2 later, I got a call from my agent. He's like, yeah, so blah, blah, we're good. I'm like, wait, that's it? Like, we're good. So I'm sorry, am I back? Like, am I back? And he's like, Allison, you're back. I'm like, oh my God. I was so excited. I was walking back from getting my hair done actually. And I just walked in the house. I'm like, Sam, like it happened. Like I'm with Fox. And none of it would have happened if it wasn't for Brock going to bat for me and vouching for me and just having the confidence and the belief in me. And I told him that, and I tell him that all the time, and I thank him all the time. And it has been the most beautiful, like coming together of people and minds. I mean, the crew that I am on at Fox, and they would all say this, like it is a dream. We all get along. We all genuinely like each other. We genuinely love each other, care about each other. And it's just been such an awesome like reset and reintroduction into this business, because it's not every team that you're on that you can say that we really all genuinely get along, and we do. And they were so excited for me to be back. They were so supportive of me. I remember Jason Benetti, when we walked on the field, my first game was week 3 at Washington State at Wisconsin. And we walked out on the field the day before heading to meetings, and he looked at me and he's like, feels good, doesn't it? I'm like, gosh, Benetti, you have no idea. Like, you have no idea. I didn't know if I'd ever see a game from that perspective again, right? And they have just they've been the best. They've been the best work family I could ask for.
So the first, that's great. And I enjoy watching Brock too. He's really good. But when he called you and you're in outside of Jackson Hole, and you got that call and you hung the phone up and you went back to your husband, what was the gut? Were you like, wait a minute, was it all of a sudden like
nervous.
Anxious, nervous?
Yes.
And sometimes sometimes you start hoping then for something. Right. And it's like, okay, I don't want to hope too much.
I don't want to jinx it.
Yeah. So tell me about that. Like right then, and that next hour after that, what was that like?
Yeah, I remember coming to lodge, and my dad was out there too, who's my biggest fan. And I was like, Dad. And he's like, what do you say? What do you say? Like, because he knew I was going to call Brock. I'm like, he's going to bat for me. Like, he thinks there's an opportunity, and he wants me to be on his crew. He's like, oh man, Al, this is big. Like, I'm like, I know, Dad, but like, we can't get too excited, right? Like, but I'm really excited, but I don't want to be excited because nothing's happened yet. I don't want to jinx it. Don't tell Mom, like, we can't tell anybody. We don't want to jinx it. And then my mind just started racing. Like, is this possible? What would this look like? And, I'm also, okay, I'll have 2 kids then. What's that going to look like? Like, so, right. You're wondering all these things at once. If I really get back, how am I going to juggle it? I remember being really nervous and cautiously optimistic, and telling my dad and my husband, like, don't tell anybody else, because I don't want this getting out and everybody in the family getting excited and then it not working out or something. So I was like holding my breath for a while, right? And then I think there was like one other phone call after that, and he's like, no, I think they were interested, which was huge because I knew like that window was shrinking. If I didn't get back in that year, I mean, you know this, like you can't be out of the business that long. Like there's just too many people, there's too much competition, there's too much turnover, and you kind of get forgotten. And so I really felt like if I didn't get somewhere that fall, like that might be it. And I was really working through in my mind like how I was going to be okay with that because I knew that was very possibly a reality. And then when Brock reached out, it was like, okay, like this really might be okay. And then you just start praying.
Yeah, great. Allison, that's so good. And when you mentioned earlier, like when you were in the throes of that, the storm where it's happening at ESPN and you're trusting God to say, you got me.
Right.
I mean, this is hard, but I'm going to stay firm to what I believe in. You got me. And then years later, here comes Fox, and you can look back to say, you were right, God.
Yeah.
You got me. You had me. Like you had my back.
Yep.
And does that ever I mean, that goes
all the time.
All the time.
Every time I walk on a field, I thank God now. And I look up and I take a moment and I acknowledge that. I mean, from the beginning, I wouldn't be there without him. But I feel so blessed and, like I said, whole again, right? Like there was a huge part of my life that was taken away, a huge part of my identity. And when it was all happening, I just remember thinking, like, I just want to feel whole. And how do I feel whole with this hole in me? And I wasn't sure how I would work to get to that point because I knew there was a good chance I might have to do it without working again. And being able to be back in college football and then back in college basketball, it just completed me, and it was such a clear, resounding testament to faith. And it did. It was like, yes, you were tested. You said you believed in me. You had to show you believed in me. Now you have a beautiful daughter, which as soon as she entered the world, I was like, okay, this was worth it. And then when I got to go back to work again, it was like the icing on the cake, right? And I'm like, all right, I'm good. Like all glory because you came through.
Period. That's amazing. Have there been some for you some like role models that you look up to that inspired you? Maybe not necessarily through this storm, but just as somebody that's coming up into this business and it's competitive. People don't realize how competitive it is and how many people want to do what you're doing. I mean, there's 1,000 of them lined up, down the street. And but have there been some people that you look to say, or even when you were younger, to say, boy, that's a role, like, man, that person inspired me. Like, I want to do that, and I can do that. And I don't know if you heard from any of those people or not through this process, but some of those like mentors or role models or inspirational people for you?
Early on, Susie Kolber. She went to University of Miami. When I was a student there, she came and spoke to the broadcasting class I was in, and I led like a panel with her. And she took the time after she spoke to watch some of our reels, including mine. And she was so supportive and encouraging, great feedback. And she said, put me on your resume.
Wow.
Like what? She's like, here's my email, here's my phone number. I will be a reference for you. Whatever you need, reach out. And I did. I remember the first time I went up for the car wash. You probably went through that at ESPN, right? The first audition, car wash, they were launching Longhorn Network, and it was that and a few other positions they were interviewing me for, and I called her, and she like walked me through it and what to expect and her whole experience, and she was awesome. She was so supportive. And then later on, this was out of nowhere, no connection to this person whatsoever. Erin Andrews reached out on Twitter and DM'd me after I worked a UCLA game in like, I don't even know, 2012 maybe, a Friday night game. And she said, I'm reaching out to Ed Placey, who was in charge of college football at the time. She goes, you are a star. You are so good. Don't change a thing. You're going to be huge in this business. And I'm like, did she get hacked? Like Erin Andrews, like the Erin Andrews? Like, are you kidding me? I mean, she wasn't even at ESPN anymore. She'd left for Fox. Like, I had no connection to her at all. I'm like, this can't be right. And so I kind of put my phone down and I'm like, I got to think about how somebody could like prank me or what's going on. But it was her. And I reached back out and she's like, whatever you need. Like, I'm a huge fan. You're phenomenal. that was amazing. And to this day, she will reach out with like words of encouragement and support. And when we see each other at the Fox seminar, like she's just the kindest soul to me. And it blew me away then, and it does to this day, because she's been through everything in this business. And she had no reason to support me, no reason to reach out. And sometimes I'm like, I need to be better about that, because I'll see young women coming up and I'm like, she's good. Like, she's kind of got it. And I don't reach out. Like I should, because I remember what a difference it made to me. I should be better about that, because it really was cool to hear from someone like that, out of the blue. And then she's continued to be just so good to me. I did, my first NFL game last Christmas, so was it 2023. And, in Pittsburgh, never done an NFL game. Like, how does this work? I know football, but I don't know, like there's different. She called, as soon as I texted her, she called me. It was like, you are going to crush it. This is amazing. I am so excited for you. This is what you need to know. Make sure you connect with this person. Make sure you know where this is. This is the stuff you'll get in. This is stuff you won't. Meetings are amazing. Like, Tomlinson's amazing. Like, she just, on the phone, like immediately, everything you want to know going into your first NFL game. Like, who does that? And that stuff is invaluable, because there aren't a lot of people who have done an NFL sideline game. And she's one of the tops. And to have her just insight and vote of confidence before I did my first NFL game was awesome. And I'll never forget how kind and supportive she's been.
We all need them. We need people that will reach out at times and help.
Yeah.
And then we need to remember them. Some people begin to forget those people that have helped them along the way. And I'm so excited that you bring those stories up, because none of us have success without other people helping us.
No, and I think there's such this stereotype of cattiness, like amongst people in my position, and it's just not true anymore. It was like I can remember starting out. It was a different scene now. Now, like, to be a bully, you're going to get bullied. Like, you're out, right? So I think it is a much more supportive and inclusive group of women, and I'm thankful for that, because it was a little more cutthroat in the beginning. But I think we've all realized there's room at the table for everybody, and we are in unique positions that you need those relationships with people who also know what it's like. So I have so many. I'm friends with pretty much everybody that I worked with at ESPN that was in my same role, and I could call on them and they'd be there, and we connect and we chat, and I'm thankful for that, because I don't think that was always the case for women coming up in this business. It was competitive. Now we're like, okay, let's all lift each other up, and it's such a better space for everybody.
Allison, as I've told you many times, just I'm so proud of you and what you did and your career. Forget what happened at ESPN, just you as who you are. And but I've asked this question to a couple of people here and there, and I'm really curious now, because you kind of went through the fire, or you did go through the fire, and you have 2 young children. I have 5 that are grown now. They're all adults, but
we're beautiful.
Thank you. But I always ask this question, or I don't always, but I have a few times. But I'm curious, and if you could gift your children, if you could just I say this in this way, if you could just breathe certain characteristics into your children, if you just give them, because sometimes our kids, we want them to have certain characteristics, and they don't always end up having them. It's just part of life. We do the best we can as parents. Parenting is not easy. It's hard. But if you could just gift your children any characteristics, what would they be?
That's a good question. I would say confidence, like we talked about earlier, which I think my parents gifted me. So I hope they always have confidence. I hope they have faith, that they know they don't have to carry the burdens of their life, like that they can turn it over to God, that they can release some of that. Like, I think people who don't have faith, they have such heavy souls because they carry the burden of their lives. And people that have faith, they can give it up. They can let it go and hand it over. And it's a lighter path to walk. And I hope they have kindness and empathy. I think we as a country have really lost our ability to relate on a human level. And I hope that they are just kind. I hope they are kind and they are considerate and take care of the people around them, because we can be so selfish, right? I think it's a really sad state we've come to in this country where we constantly see division and we see our differences and we don't see what connects us on a human level. So I pray that they are kind and generous. And if they could be anything in life, I just want them to be happy, right? Isn't that what any parent, you just want your kids to be happy, whatever that looks like for them. As long as they're good people and they're happy, like, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Amazing. Well, this has been fun. I could talk to you for hours and we could go through everything, but I just want to say thank you for coming. And thank you for having the courage, Allison, to stand up for in a very, very difficult time period in a lot of people's lives through that whole COVID situation. But you stood up, you stood strong, and your convictions came out. And that's an inspiration to a lot of people. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for being open to this conversation and for having it with me. And thank you for being the person you are, because when you were at NC State, you were so welcoming to me and open. And I remember like Jeff letting me bug him in the huddles, and you helped me be the best reporter I could be by just being you. Yeah. And I've never forgotten that. And the access you would give us, the insight you would give us was so valuable. And I think it helped me be a better reporter. So thank you. And know that is not forgotten and forever appreciated.
You got it. Allison Williams, thank you so much for being on the front row with Coach Mark Gottfried.